Our story begins in a time of great flux, not just any time, but the very beginning of time, as Rathnir knows it. A small nomad tribe known simply as Styx wander the deserts of Yimu-Audal, headed southward. They know not where they are headed, only that they must find the world's shadow and cling to it. You see, at this time in Rathnir's history, no one was safe. Empires were rapidly expanding, towns turned into cities, and again to nations in the blink of an eye. For those not involved in geopolitics already, the world was growing smaller and smaller, fewer places to hide, and less land to call your own. Styx were one of these people searching for relief, and that was just what they found. 4 mystics of the Styx tribe, Kalamos, Phyros, Sivan, and Eldoth, had been seeking to strengthen their connection to the spirit realm, a realm which contains secrets of magic that many would consider unnatural. Upon reaching the peak of a coastal mountain just on the edge of the ancient quartz forest, Kalamos felt a warm pull guiding him into the valley below. There lie the glowing hilt of a sword, one far too large for any man to wield. The 4 mystics began investigating the hilt. Eldoth excavated the land around the hilt. Kalamos studied the markings and craftsmanship. Phyros cultivated the fertile land for food, and Sivan protected the group from creatures of the night. Upon uncovering the blade, the 4 mystics found what Kalamos referred to as spiritual flux, a form of raw ethereal matter, which was binding the steel blade together. Phyros would lunge towards the flux, unaware of what would follow. Visions of a plane not dissimilar to ours shot through her mind, and there she saw it, a mirror world of their own. She could make out what seemed to be her companions, but wait, no, that can't be right. Her companions had been replaced by her fallen mother, father, and sister. Phyros recoiled, and the mystics vowed not to touch the flux ever again, but continued their research in other ways. It had become clear that the sword acted as some sort of ley line between the spirit realm and Rathnir. For the remainder of their days, they sought to uncover the mysteries of the blade. Years pass. Meanwhile, Leythe has grown into a small village. Pilgrims from all over Rathnir had heard of the discovery made at Leythe. Some sought to help in the research efforts, others simply wanted a respite. Let's take a look at some of the early historical figures of Leythe. Mandib, architect and general handyman, pioneered the 3-stripe style of early Lathan casual wear. Georgopoulos, the miner and business mogul. This guy dug a tunnel from one world border to the other because, and I quote, "I got bored." Dilford Dragarok, a stout fellow, willing to slam his head into anything, caused what might be the first international conflict involving a Yimu-Audal diplomat on Rathnir. And StubbornDucky, aka Storente Vogel. Diplomat, leader, philosopher, genius, grand warrior, smart guy, handsome fella, professional chef, scientist, UN poll watcher, leader, futurist, #1 FBI watch list the 2-time, Uncle Stubbo to many, and least importantly, Chief of Leythe. These 4 are considered the player founders of Leythe. What happens next may not surprise you considering the state of the world so far. War comes to the western reaches of Sparwood. The United Empire of Acacia has begun expanding. With a large but somewhat inexperienced player base, Acacia is able to scare its smaller neighbors into submission using its perceived military might. Leythe isn't on their radar, as up to this point, Leythe has not made itself known to the world of diplomacy at large. One such neighbor being the people of Bogmire, who are a smaller group settled within a swamp located between Acacia's heartland and Leythe. Firing up the forges, smelters, and brewing stands, Leythe begins production of war material, which would be primarily overseen by Georgopoulos. Some of this material was stashed away for future use. However, and more importantly, much of it was to be shipped off to Bogmire in an attempt to slow Acacia's expansion towards Leythe. Under the dark of night, Ducky would carry brews, armor, food, and weapons into the Bogmirian camps. Just a few days later, the Battle of Bogmire concludes. The result is an Acacian defeat. Although Acacia had superior numbers, they were no match for the well-equipped and unwavering citizens of Bogmire. Although not directly involved in the fighting, this battle serves as a perfect example of Lathian military strategy going forward. To sum up the military lessons learned, focus on production of equipment, ensuring you can arm every soldier with superior quality and quantity of equipment. Don't show your hand, and use your enemy's hubris to your advantage. As time passes, Lathe becomes a member of the nation of Serafini, a nation similar to the real-life nation of Venice. Ducky serves as the third Doge of Serafini, spending a month as the ruler of a young, burgeoning nation. Serafini doubles in size due to Lathe joining, making it a new power in Sparta. However, Ducky's political career sort of came out of nowhere. So why did he run for election? It wasn't because he wanted to be a hero, a popular figurehead, or even a politician. It's actually quite simple. Ever since Lathe had been contacted by the original Serafinian Doge, Dino Gamer, talks of how do we tax this and that seemed to be some of Serafini's highest concern. So really, Ducky's campaign for election was just a ruse so that he and his buddies didn't have to pay any tax, a truly valuable cause. On Ducky's first day in office, a folder would be dropped on his desk by Treasurer IMM100. The cover read as follows: State of Serafini Tax Code. The folder would go unopened and be immediately lost in a tragic boating accident. After his time as Doge, Ducky returns to his leadership position in Lathe, for what he thought would be some much-needed rest. The drums of war are thumping. The Lathe Acacian War, the Acacian Civil War, or even the Lathe War for Independence has begun. But how did we get here? Wasn't Acacia already dealt with back in Bogmire? Well, yes, but also no. Acacia has been revived as the Second Acacian Empire, led by the same player as before, MW Neos. This time, the Empire was looking to extend further than before, and the citizens of Bogmire had largely become inactive, meaning there was even less resistance to Acacian imperial expansion. Things were different this time, however. Lathe was now just a region in the larger state of Serafini, and the land that Lathe stood on would surely be protected by Serafini. Right, guys? Right? There wouldn't be any sort of negotiations going on between the current Serafinian government and Acacia. That would be insane! So anyways, it was time for war. We're gonna speedrun the war, even though it might be the single most important historical event that Lathe was ever involved in, because if we don't, we will be here for ages, and there will be a minimum of 47 minor details that we may have gotten wrong. Here we go. War is declared on March 19th, 2021, meaning the first battle of the war can occur 24 hours later on March 20th. This is largely considered the formal beginning of the war. StubbornDucky, aware of growing tensions, negotiates with a mercenary group known as the Hands. They will help in the battles to come. Neos begins organizing his troops and distributing war material to his followers. They are confident due to their far superior numbers and previous experience. Neos declares, "Alright, I had enough seeing this. Tomorrow we are raising Lathe, from ground up." Ducky, Mandiba, Georgopolis, Pineapple, Dilford Dragorok, and RC Fan all prepared for the worst. The first battle is meant to take place at Lathe. However, roughly 15 minutes into the 2-hour battle period, no attacking army was spotted anywhere near Lathe, so it was decided the combination of Lathian military and mercenaries would make their move on the closest Acacian town, Ishlarin. The Acacian army is caught somewhat by surprise and is surrounded in the fort at Ishlarin, where fairly quickly the Acacian forces are routed. Now the Lathian forces are onto the Acacian capital, it's time to make a statement. The handful of defenders are cut down where they stand as Lathian forces again overwhelm the Acacians. Neos is sighted near the throne room. Several Lathians and mercenaries give chase, but to no avail. Neos escapes to his secret bunker. However, the throne room has been taken.
The chair you're sitting on has got to be the most uncomfortable chair in the world. It's violating your backside.
Spies inform Lathian forces that the Acacians are regrouping to the north. Wait, no, east. Wait, south.
You suck.
No, definitely east for sure. Turns out the spies weren't lying. They were just directionally challenged. Acacian forces regroup at Emerald Isle, a town built up like a fort. Ducky is the first to arrive, taking out several defenders with his bow. Dilford Dragarok would be the first Lathian to fall. He was killed several times while ascending a particularly steep set of stairs near the edge of town. Any Acacians who left the security of the magically warded doors of the Emerald Isle would be killed. A bandit shows up to third party the entire battle. He kills a few people, but then ultimately leaves, probably realizing the shit show he saw in front of him. Lathian forces retreat from Emerald Isle, and the first battle of the war concludes. Overnight, Acacian forces construct a fort on a hill just outside the Leythe clan. The fort is spotted, and Lathe quickly gathers to combat its defenders. StubbornDucky, RC Fan, and Yaki would be the ones to take up arms. Skirmishes ensue, arrows are exchanged, several defenders are picked off through the window hatches, and many inside the fort complain about being on low supply. The Chaw, a double agent, soon to be triple agent, opens the locked door for Yaki to enter Pearl Inn. Acacians attempt to stop Yaki with lava, but it's too late. Yaki would go on to kill every single person inside the fort multiple times without dying. Yaki's nickname would soon become the Bloodhound. Things would die down for a period of time after the second battle at what was now called Fort Lathe. This period lasted from March 22nd to April 5th. This time period consisted of the following: construction of a war monument to fallen Acacian and Lathian soldiers, located between Acacian and Lathian lines. Construction of improvised gallows displaying Acacian soldiers' heads outside of the Lathe's walls. Spread of war propaganda from both sides. During this time, rebel factions began to form within Acacia, as many began to sympathize with Lathe. Some of these rebels came from the following towns or regions: Sanyutoshi, Greenstem, Emerald Isle, Red Bay, Instor, Montebissumor, and Acacia was now internally in shambles. The rebels form an alliance with Lathe. Things get complicated. Some rebels leave, other rebels form separate alliances with each other. The final battle occurs again at Ishleren, now called Greenstem, as the rebels have taken over. The battle saw the largest gathering of forces since the first day of the war. Lathians, Stemmers, mercenaries, and other rebels all gather at Fort Creighton before the battle. Fighting ensues, and the rebel forces win in a decisive victory. The battle would go on to be called the Greenstem Massacre.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Burke.
Neos reportedly dies of sadness. Dmitry Yazov is chosen as the new Acacian emperor. The war is pretty much over. Negotiations would be ongoing for some time. However, on April 14th, Lathe was formally recognized as independent and gained the territory that Bogmire had previously owned. Alright, we can slow down a bit now. The remaining rebel factions would negotiate their own deals with the new emperor Yazov, and thus several new nations are born on the continent of Sparwood. Even the mighty would come into being due to the events of this war. With Acacia dealt with, and Sparwood finally experiencing an ounce of stability, Lathe sets its sights on an international partnership. You see, during the war, the small town of Greenstem, formerly Ishleren, had been of great help. Its founding members, Jack W. and Bossman CFP, were in constant contact with StubbornDucky, and they seemed to be the most reliable of all of the Acacian rebels. Rumor has it that these three diplomats had already been jointly governing their territories before things were even made official. An announcement was made bringing the nations of Lathe and Greenstem together into what would be known as Lathe Greenstem. Things would move quickly, as not too long after this unification, the nations of Avaria and the Eok Junta would be added to this union, officially creating the United Kingdoms of Western Sparwood. The UKWS would be primarily helmed by the following people: StubbornDucky, Jack W., Bossman CFP, and Yazov. Lathe would serve as the capital of this new nation and experience a golden age of growth not seen since its founding. Earth was moved, houses constructed, even a university and renovations to the southern walls. But the largest of all of these new construction projects would be none other than the UKWS Assembly Building. The building was designed by StubbornDucky and Jack W. and would go into construction almost immediately after a suitable site was found. But what else was going on in the UKWS while this all happened? Well, that's where it gets complicated.
The Japanese are in mourning for Emperor Hirohito.
It was noontime today in the center of Beijing.
I don't know how you do it,
I put together some really impressive deals. But this thing you've pulled off, it's amazing. A lurger for just $1? How do you do it? What's your secret?
Got a buck? You're in luck, because you can get a delicious beefy lurger and even more lurger at the lurger cart every day.
Together, Stubborn, we could own this server.
Terry, get up, Terry! We gotta finish the video! Fuck! I came all this way, you have to finish the video, Terry. Wake up, Terry! Please, Terry, please! You have to wake up and finish the video. What are you gonna do if you don't finish the video, Terry? Deep in the back halls of Laythe, ideas were brewing and grand plans were drawn up by the collective leadership. They needed to exert influence, make a name for themselves, maybe even unite Sparwood. However, the UKWS did not have a massive population. In fact, Sparwood as a continent actually had a relatively low population, especially in relation to its total land area. Despite this, the UKWS would be ranked as one of the 10 most powerful nations on Rathnir at the time. But why? The answer? Political posturing. The UKWS had 3 members with significant background in politics by this point: Jack W., StubbornDucky, and Yazov. Through a careful balance of threats, negotiations, treaties, and confidence, the UKWS put up a front of a truly powerful nation without fighting a single battle.
You're a phony!
This group of players is what I would refer to as the political powerhouse, and they had things running like a well-oiled machine. However, things are not always what they seem.
That shit doesn't make sense.
Remember the Hands, the mercenary group Laythe hired during the war? Well, they are actually known as the Chancellor's Hands. That Chancellor being the Chancellor of Bardonia, the biggest and baddest nation on the server. This nation was led by Unicorn Boy, aka Uni. And Uni was a big fan of conquest by any means. During the negotiations with the Hands, StubbornDucky would become familiar with many Bardonian diplomats, and ultimately, with the way things went, both Laythe and Bardonia were very happy to work together in the future. But this was not the UKWS's only connection to Bardonia. Jack W. had begun his work on the server as a Bardonian diplomat, leading a completely justifiable invasion of the island nations of Plagos. Go ahead, ask anyone who was around during this time about Jack W., and you will hear only good things, I assure you. Point being, the UKWS had some ties to Bardonia. Now this is where the things I am saying will get people up in arms. There are only 7 people in the history of the server to ever know about what I am going to talk about. 5 of those people are Jack W., StubbornDucky, Bossman CFP, Yazov, and Uni. The other 2 know who they are. The UKWS leadership concocted a plan that would put almost 1/3 of the server's landmass under direct control of Bardonia. Step 1. Ally with Tortuga. The sexy Canadian, the leader of Tortuga and overall cool guy, already had a positive opinion of some of the UKWS members after working with them in the war against Acacia. Step 2. Take Serafini. Both StubbornDucky and Jack W. were former doges of Serafini, and Serafini had become inactive. Out of fear of the UBSR taking over their old home, they drew plans to retake the Forgotten Nation. Step 3. Install Yazov as leader of Viadoxa.
The re-establishment of the United Arcanate had 3 big claimants to it: Yazov, Numis McSpiegel, and Valerie Hiroshi. Yazov had the powerful empire allies of Bardonia and Tortuga backing him, so Numis joined with him and they established the Second Arcanate of Viadoxa. Valerie Hiroshi, being left out, started 4 minor and unsuccessful rebellions, so the new Archons burned her town down and they exiled her.
Viadoxa was experiencing a period of restlessness, and Yazov had emerged as a popular figure within Viadoxa due to his vast involvement in politics. This step was extremely important, as Viadoxa had always stood in direct opposition to Bardonia. Step 4. Get rid of the UBSR. The UBSR had significant issues with the leadership in the UKWS member nation of Avaria. They were also posturing to take Serafini. Both of these were reason enough for fighting them. So what happened? Whether plans had leaked or it was just a righteous crusade, a coalition would soon form against the UKWS before the plan was finalized. The Coalition of Nations was made up of several large nations on the server, and threatened full-scale invasion of the UKWS if it was not disbanded and Jack W banished from Sparwood. The Coalition seemed to be primarily interested in going after Jack W, possibly for his relation to his religion of Garfism, or maybe even that stuff he did in Plagos. No matter, the UKWS complied, and was disbanded into its component states of Leythe, Greenstem, Avaria, and Eok. This was not the end, though. The Coalition did not have the effect that they had hoped it would have. Instead, it further galvanized the spirit of our political powerhouse. They decided it was time. Lath and Greenstem reformed their alliance, and Yazov set off for Viadoxa. If you would like to know the details of Viadoxa's history, Stoney has a great video on it, but I will give a brief synopsis of some of what was missing from his video, and why in his own words, things seemed kinda sus. Yazov brought his lands in Eok to Viadoxa as a bargaining chip. Essentially, it gained him favor in the eyes of Viadoxa. That left Lathe and Greenstem to unite under Bardonia, now becoming direct vassals instead of whatever shady relationship they used to have. Viadoxa now enters a succession crisis, with several claimants to the Arcanate, as is explained in the previously mentioned video from Stoneworks. Yazov and Numis McSpiegel would become the leaders of Viadoxa and would rapidly expand Viadoxan territory as neighboring nations sought safety from Bardonian expansion. This whole time, however, Yazov was acting directly in the best interests of Bardonia while working together with Jack W, StubbornDucky, Bossman CFP, and Uni. All of the threats made by Bardonia that led to more nations joining Viadoxa were a farce. The UBSR was conquered without a drop of blood, because its leadership believed the only way to save themselves from Bardonian rule was to join Viadoxa, which, as we all know now, was actually already under Bardonian rule. The plan of the political powerhouse had been successful, and for a period of time, Bardonia controlled almost 1/3 of the server's landmass, as well as the next most powerful nation behind itself. A falling out would occur between Uni and Jack W. Jack W had been acting as the primary link between Bardonia and our Sparwood conspirators. In what was likely a mixture of a misunderstanding and blind rage, Uni exiled Jack W from Bardonia for questioning many of his decisions and telling Uni that he had messed up by not leveraging what Jack W had been working on in Sparwood. Ultimately, instead of continuing with the plan that Jack W, StubbornDucky, and Yazov had successfully executed, Uni cut the cord and Bardonia was plunged into war. Yazov would disappear from Viadoxa and the political powerhouse would dissolve to just inches from complete success. Lathe did not do well after the previous events. Not too long after war breaks out between Bardonia and the world, Lathe's leader, since the very beginning, goes missing. StubbornDucky would not be seen for months. Lathian internal government documents and letters would leak, revealing something tragic had happened somewhere in the northwest territory of Lathe. A statement was sent out saying that Councilman Mandiba would be in charge until an investigation was complete. What would follow is a steep decline in population and general activity within Lathe. Lathe would be tossed around from nation to nation. First, it would be taken in as a territory in Frosterium federal land. Then it would be purchased by Avaria, before being yet again taken by Tortuga and Borehammer. Lathe had gone from one of the largest and most powerful nations in Sparwood to a forgettable city. The only resurgence in activity took place around early to mid-2022, when Garphism experienced a new era of revelationist Garphism. This brought back interest to Greenstem and thus Lathe. Players such as Clap Cheeks, Donut, Skippy, Sweet Bobby Sauce, Woj Woj, and more would reignite the spark of Greenstem and Lathe. Reports of paranormal activity in and around Lathe and Greenstem were made several times around this period, with many simply stating that, "We've got a bit of a ghost problem." However, StubbornDucky was still nowhere to be seen. Around this time, the goddess of war Segra had been wreaking havoc, spreading chaos, and dividing nations. Segra would raise armies to serve her on her path to the total destruction of the universe. Some of Segra's chaos made its way to Lathe, when on June 22, 2022, Segra lifted the Lathian sword out of the ground, and StubbornDucky finally reappeared standing at the edge of the pit in Lathe, staring at the glowing sword reaching into the sky. A message would be blasted into the minds of every waking soul on Rathnir. The sword is pulled. The first player to arrive at Lathe would be D. Marks. DM had suspected that the message was in reference to Lathe, and they themselves had a significant interest in the sword, as it was a religious icon in his religion of the Church of Stalreza. DM talked to StubbornDucky and even apologized for what he considered failing Ducky, saying, "I'm sorry I failed you. You said Lathe should be led by a Lathian, and it is not." Ducky assured him that he had not failed, and that he had meant someone with the heart of a Lathian, as being a Lathian was never about a location, but a set of ideas. After a short chat, more people would arrive from all over Rathnir, witnessing an ethereal StubbornDucky with wings, and a sword pulled 50 meters into the air, just floating there. An artifact of Segra materialized in front of them. StubbornDucky opened the chest. Inside was a crystal and a book. The book warned of impending danger, and that some of those among us could not be trusted. StubbornDucky relayed this information to the crowd just before the demons of Segra rained down upon them.
Oh fuck.
In the end, dozens of people from all over Rathnir stood bloodied beneath the sword of Lathe, gazing up at its purple glow, wondering in awe just like the pilgrims before them.